got interested in aviation, built some small model airplanes, and then went to the War Department in 1903 and got a grant of $50,000 to build a full-size airplane. That's an awful lot of money. He also raised another $20,000. He had $70,000. He built this based on one of his models. It's got two wings. It's got a reciprocating engine on it. He bought this engine, which was pretty lousy, and he hired a young engineer to work on that engine. And that fellow got that engine up to 52 horsepower. 1903, the Wright brothers engine, same time frame, 8 horsepower. So significant difference. The young engineer also became the pilot. And the pilot sits in this little gondola all the way at the very bottom of it. Now you notice the silver canisters on it? This thing was designed to be launched off the roof of a houseboat anchored in the Potomac, not very far from here. It's a spring-loaded catapult. It's supposed to run down, fly down the Potomac River, and eventually run out of power and just settle down the river. The silver canisters are flotation units. You might also notice that the pilot's head's a lot lower than the flotation unit. Not a great design. That's good. In October 1903, attempted the first launch of this thing, spring-loaded catapult, shot it off, the whole thing fell apart right into the water, structurally unsound. Samuel Pierpont Langley made the major mistake of most Washington people of inviting the media down to watch this wonderful landing. And there's actually a photograph of this thing falling apart. They pulled it out of the water, put it back together. 9 days before the Wright brothers flight, they attempted the same launch with exactly the same results. The whole thing fell apart into the water. Langley gave up on his experiments, died shortly after that. His successor at the Smithsonian eventually had it put back together and hung in the Smithsonian with a plaque on it saying that it was the first aircraft capable of manned flight, which of course wasn't true. The Wright brothers took great exception to this, and the Wright brothers 1903 flyer went to London, where it was on display until 1947, at which time they finally reached an agreement with the Smithsonian. The plaque came down off of this. One of the other parts of the agreement is that the two are never shown in the same location. That's why this is here, and the Wright brothers 1903 flyer is downtown. Revenge was sweet. Now, there was a significant difference about what the Wright brothers were doing and what Langley did. Langley really wasn't very interested in how you control an airplane, where that was the whole purpose of what the Wright brothers were doing. The Wright brothers, of course, for nose up and down for pitch, they used an elevator, which they mounted on the nose, rudder for yaw, and for roll, they used wing warping, where you actually twist the wings and you control your roll. I want to show you a plane down here.
World War II. Narrated by Tom Brokaw, D-Day, Normandy 1944, provides a new perspective on this monumental event that changed the world.
This is weird.
Are available now on D-Day.
It's got two weird engines. I've seen it in a picture.
On the main floor.
This is a French-built 1914 World War I Padron G4. But look at this upper wing here, and you see that lacing in there. And that's because this plane uses the Wright brothers method of roll control and wing warping, and to keep the fabric intact so it doesn't alter apart. That's all original fabric, 1914, with the exception of a couple small patches. You notice this reel up here on this plane, and it runs down a tube, and there's a lead weight down there. That's the antenna for a wireless system in this plane. You reel it out for a length corresponding to the frequency you want to use, and the observer in the front seat there, had the observer in the front, pilot sat in the back. The engines are 80 horsepower rotary engines. That is, the engine and the prop is fixed together, and the whole engine rotates around the shaft. They put cowling around because the lubricants they used for this thing were really noxious, and to keep the fumes away from the pilots. They were losing pilots because of the fumes. They put the cowling around. 1917, the United States finally got involved in World War I. The total U.S. military aviation consisted of 55 airplanes at that time, most of which were obsolete. We bought planes, principally from the French, some from the British. We also contracted with the French and British and Italians to do the flight training for our pilots. First one we bought was this one hanging up here. That's the Newport. This one has the hat and ring symbol in it. That's the 94th Aero Squadron, Eddie Rickenbacker Squadron. And of course, he was the leading ace for the United States during World War I. The French were delighted at selling us this plane. They had a better plane coming out. The SPAD was coming out, which is significantly better than this. And this plane also had a major problem associated with it, and they were delighted in letting us deal with it. It had a habit in a steep dive of the fabric would shed off the top wing, and it simply doesn't fly very well that way. Although there is a name of a young lieutenant painted on the side of it, immortalized. He actually survived 2 episodes of the fabric shedding off his top wing. This is a 2-seat reconnaissance version of the SPAD, and this is the plane that General Billy Mitchell flew in combat in World War I. And you notice it does have a inlet right down here. It has a wireless system in it. It uses a wind-driven generator. None survived.
I think I've read that book before. I just take on
I want you to take a look at this plane here.
Also the same thing. The RC folio.
This is a Fowler Gauge. Built by Gauge, but flown by Fowler. What's significant about this plane is this is the first plane to fly non-stop from the Pacific to the Atlantic. But he did it across the Panama Isthmus, a distance of 54 miles.
Okay. I was going to say.
It was in the record book. It was a very hazardous journey, though. It's all jungle, and he took along a photographer, and then made a wonderful living afterwards, touring the country, putting on this little show of his trip across the wilds of Panama. But I want to point out something else on this plane to you. That is, an evolution was taking place on control features on aircraft at this time. We quickly found out the Wright brothers' method of wing warping, okay for real slow flight. Once you started going a little bit faster, it just didn't work very well. This plane has an aileron stuck between 2 wings. And if you look directly above us, the Benoit Horn, they put an aileron way out beyond the wing tip. And Billy Mitchell's airplane has an aileron that is actually part of the upper wing surface itself. And that became the more established method of roll control, was using an aileron built into the wing surface itself. Still is today. I wanted to take a look at the gray one over here.
Whoa, it's see-through.
Yeah, pretty cool, isn't it? You can see it all in there. This is an N9H. It is built by Glenn Curtis. It is nothing more than a Curtis Jenny, a JN4 that was adapted for training Navy pilots during World War I. It had this large float added to it, and because of the drag of that thing, the wing is 10 feet longer than a Curtis Jenny. Looking in this nice clear plastic on the side here, you can see all the creature comforts of the nice wicker chairs for the pilots to sit in. That's a Hispano-Suiza engine above it, and that's the radiator sticking right up in front, blocking the pilot's view.
Ooh.
One of the final exercises that a Navy pilot had to do before he got his wings with this thing, you had to take it solo. You had to climb up to 5,000 feet. And with this big old float hanging on here, creating drag, it took almost an hour to get to 5,000 feet. Once he got to 5,000 feet, had to shut the engine down, had to circle around and land next to the crash boat in Pensacola Bay. If you did that, you're on your way to getting your wings. If not, well, it really didn't matter anymore. You have the silver one hanging up here. other one hanging up there is a Boeing FB-5. This is typical of the planes we had aboard our first Navy aircraft carrier in 1925. 1925, the engine on that is now a 500 horsepower engine. So we go from 80 horsepower in the Caudron in 1914, 1925, we're up to a 500 horsepower engine. That's a liquid-cooled engine, probably the last liquid-cooled engine the Navy ever used for carrier operations. Liquid-cooled engines, the plane's heavier. That's a disadvantage carrier work. Also, it requires more maintenance. You'll notice this plane, one thing it's missing from it, and that's the tail hook, and it has Marine Corps markings on it. Typical then and pretty much today, Navy airplanes are built to make a specific number of carrier landings before it is estimated that the airframe is overstressed. At which time we would generally send them back to the factory or somewhere. Tail hook would generally be pulled off, and then we'd give it to the Marine Corps for land-based operations. We'd give it to Mikey. All the early flight stuff has a lot of things in common. They've got open cockpits, fixed landing gear, and they're made out of sticks and cloth. Between World War I and World War II, a transition took place in the construction of aircraft. And I want to show you one of those transitional aircraft. We're going to go out this way. That isn't if you want to drive it.
Oh my God, thank you. I'll have to bring him to pick it though, because I don't know what he's for Halloween.
Come on, Jack.
Oh, SR-71. There's a little SR-71 like mine, but except it was smaller.
He'll come and see it once, and then he's gone.
Take a look at the plane hanging up here. Get up front. With the black and white markings, all drab fuselage and the yellow wings. That is a Boeing P-26 pea shooter. That's what we call a transitional aircraft between World War I and World War II construction. It still has an open cockpit, and it still has fixed landing gear. But what's different about it is it's now made all out of metal, and it now has flaps on it, so that we can land and take off at slower airspeeds using shorter runways. This plane actually saw combat in World War II. There were 9 of them stationed in the Philippines at the beginning of the war, and they were there shooting away. Not very successfully, but they were busy. Yeah, I'm sure you noticed the 2 planes over here when you first came in. The Warhawk here with that distinctive mouth design painted on it, made famous, of course, by the Flying Tigers, the American Volunteer Group. Were extremely successful, and of course that was before the United States actually got involved in World War II. And a group of military pilots who went to fly for Claire Chennault in China. Their success was simply based around the tactic that Claire Chennault had them employ. And that tactic was based on the simple fact that in a turning dogfight, a light plane is always going to outturn a heavier plane, and he's going to eventually win the dogfight. Japanese planes were built to be extremely light. They had no armor plating on them, no self-sealing fuel tanks. They seldom had even radios in them. They were made to be very light. They didn't have dual hydraulic systems or anything. This plane, the Warhawk, American planes were built to take a lot of punishment and keep flying. That plane has armor plating on it. It's got self-sealing fuel tanks. It's got dual hydraulic systems and other redundancies in it. Made it heavy. Claire Chennault said, we're not going to get into a turning dogfight. You simply sit up high above, you dive down and shoot every bullet you have when they pass by, run straight ahead and come back and shoot another day. In a 6-month period of time, they shot down over 470 Japanese planes and only lost 11 of their own.
Wow.
And most of those 11s, guys violated Claire Chennault's rules about getting into a dogfight. Occasionally, they do a head-on attack. And that was okay because you could take a lot of punishment with this
The
thing.
Japanese, assuming that their planes weren't coming back, they were for one-way transit.
Basically,
They were so light.
yeah. They had a whole different philosophy about about people and pilots in particular. And one of the downfalls of the Japanese at the very end was they kept all their pilots out there. You stayed out and fought until you died.
Right.
And so they had nobody with experience to train other pilots.
Right.
And that was a big problem. This Warhawk has a name on it, Lopes Hope. And that's in honor of Don Lopez, who was the assistant director of the Air and Space Museum, who was an ace during World War II flying this type of an airplane. The plane behind it, the Corsair, the F-4U. The late 1930s, we had this large engine developed. That engine produces over 2,000 horsepower. The Navy said to the industry, take this engine and build an airplane, a fighter that we can utilize, and it's got to go fast. One of the problems in building airplanes, particularly in the late 30s, was reducing the drag, and one of the major things still in drag was the landing gear being partially hanging out. So they came up with a unique design. That is, they bent the wing down, and at the lowest point you can put short landing gear on, and those short landing gear were completely retractable into the wing. That's the first single engine fighter that could go over 400 miles per hour straight and level. Wonderful plane. It also illustrates the problem that we had during World War II. We started production and everything before all the final testing was done. And when it went for its carrier suitability trials, it actually failed, but production was going on. It had two problems, major problems. One, in a carrier landing, particularly in that area, you're in a bank of about 22 to 25 degrees, and we would fly about 2 to 5 knots above stall speed. When this plane would stall, it would stall off on the left wing. And you start to roll off onto the left wing. As you add power to recover from that, the torque on that 2,000 horsepower engine continues that roll, so you end up flat on your back. At maximum 60 feet, that's not good. The other thing was, this plane, the wings now fold straight up overhead. Most carrier planes prior to this all folded straight back. They fold up straight up overhead. We are now building CVEs, referred to as Jeep carriers. The hangar deck on a CVE is lower than it is on an attack carrier. It didn't fit. First production run went to the Marine Corps for land-based operations. And then we eventually made some changes to this. The wings are actually 6 inches shorter, and they put a spoiler on the starboard wing, so now you stall on that thing, it stalls to the right, add power to straighten you right up. And eventually, because of that big engine hangs way out in front of you, and they're trying to taxi around on the ground, it's really difficult. You have to make these real steep S-turns. And so eventually they moved the cockpit 6 inches forward. It didn't really help. We're going to go down this way.
I know we're going to save the best for last. Are we saving the best for last?
Huh?
Are we saving the SR-71 for last?
Yeah.
Because it's the best.
Is it? It is.
Save the best for last. That's what they always say. Oh yes, I've seen this. I'll just sit.
This is a Hawker Hurricane, Royal Air Force. This was really a significant plane for the British. It was their first fighter with a single wing and their first fighter with retractable landing gear. The Hawker Hurricane, the Spitfire came out about 3 months after the Hawker Hurricane. And the Spitfire is about 38 miles an hour faster than the Hawker Hurricane. The two of them is basically, let's say, Britain during the Battle of Britain that summer of 1940. Although they lost over 700 aircraft during that period of time, almost a million pilots. The Hawker Hurricane also illustrates a problem that the British had in trying to build airplanes during that period of time. Resources were so extremely scarce. All the framing inside this airplane is wood, it's not metal. The fuselage is fabric covered from the cockpit aft, and all of the original production ones, the wings were cloth covered as well. Aluminum was really scarce, everything had to be imported. There were many different armament configurations made of this airplane. This one's got 4 20mm cannons. and was used as a tank cluster in the North African campaign. You'll hear me refer to weapons as either machine guns or cannons, and there is a difference. And it's the size of the bullet. If it's a ½ inch or larger, it's a cannon. Anything smaller, it's a machine gun. It was a wonderful airplane, Hawker Hurricane. I want to show you one down here, which is actually the only reproduction we have of it. This is a reproduction of the Wright Brothers 1908 Flyer. Now, you may recall the 1903 airplane that they originally flew. The pilot actually laid down on his stomach, and his hips were in a cradle, and in order to control the wing warping, you moved your hips back and forth. In 1908, they were trying to win a $25,000 contract providing airplanes to the Army. And that contract specified that it had to be able to carry an observer. So now their airplane has 2 seats in it. They're really tiny. There's 2 seats. And so they can change the control system as well. That it has stick. It still uses wing warping. Has the elevator mounted up front, rudder back there. It's got a 4-cylinder engine, radiator, fuel tank. In 1908, Orville was demonstrating this plane over here at Fort Myers, not very far from here. He made a couple flights and then he came back and took along with the Army observer, Lieutenant Selfridge, who was in the right seat. And unfortunately, during that flight, one of the props split apart and severed a whole bunch of wires holding this thing together in the crash. Lieutenant Selfridge became the first aviation fatality. And Orville suffered serious injuries, and it took him a couple of years to recover from it. He did fly again later on, and he actually went back in 1910 and demonstrated the aircraft for the Army. They didn't win the contract, though. I'm going to go in there and show you the control features, how this thing works.
He gets going there.
It's got these 3 sticks here, you know, the elevator, mounted on a nose, controlled by this one. Rudder. Watch the wing. Start in 5 minutes. Instrumentation was relegated to that string there. That's I guess you could call it a yaw meter, because if it's hanging straight down, you're in balanced flight. If it's